Hey everyone, welcome back to Helican Explanations. Today we are diving into something really exciting, like how to boot your Raspberry Pi from an SSD. If you are looking to speed up your Raspberry Pi and enhance its performance, you are in the right place. Let's get started with today's video. Why do we use SSDs in the first place? What are the primary requirements to boot up from an SSD? All these will be answered in today's videos. Let's first understand why do we use SSDs in the place of hard drives or SD cards. We have multiple other sources. Even cloud storage is one of an option nowadays, but not for the boot purpose. But yeah, cloud storage is also one of the options which gives us fast access and you can access it from everywhere without carrying something in your hand or in your pocket. But when you use this SSD in your computer, and if you want to transfer a file with no lag in the transfer bar, you like it, right? When you have no lag in the transfer bar, it gives you some speed and faster transfer rates when you compare with SD cards and HDDs out there. And what is its use case in Raspberry Pi 5? Why do we use it in Raspberry Pi? Is it really advantageous when we use in Raspberry Pi, or is it also having some own disadvantages when we use it in Raspberry Pi 5? Today our use case would be if we use LLMs like Olama or ChatGPT or anything else on Raspberry. We need some higher speed of disk to access storage or archives or anything. But with use of SD card or a powerful SD card also, it can't even match up to 50% of an SSD speed, right? Which gives you 1 gigs of speed, and SD card and megas of speed. It don't match literally, not even 50%. What are some advantages of SSDs over SD cards? They typically have read and write speeds which are significantly higher than SD cards and hard drives. And durability and readability, wear leveling, error correction, endurance. SSD utilize advanced wear leveling techniques, right? And error correction. SSDs often incorporate more sophisticated error correction algorithms when compared to SD cards and hard drives. Hard drives also do, but not same as when compared to an SSD. And endurance also. The main thing and the main part is about storage capacity. We can even find 256 gigs of storage of SD card, but using a 1 TB or 512 GB SSD would be more advantageous than when you use 128 gigs or 64 gigs of SD card, right? And performance and consistency, or let's say literally both. Performance consistency, sustained performance, and very important thing, IOPS, input or output operations per second. SSD offers higher IOPS, which translates to better performance for multitasking and handling multiple processes simultaneously. And when it comes to Raspberry Pi, our main thing we have to focus on here is power consumption. SSDs generally consume less power when compared to traditional hard drives, which is literally true, right? Because for a hard drive, it typically works on RPM, like the base level is 5400 RPM, where an SSD doesn't require some mechanical attributes to the disk, right? So power consumption is very important when it comes to Raspberry. Yeah, SSD is having an advantage over Raspberry Pi. Temperature tolerance is one of the most important thing when it comes to the microcontrollers like Raspberry. Form factor and connectivity, that's also one of the important one. And latency, lower latency, higher transfer rates, and more faster data retrieval, which is crucial for performance intensive applications. If you go on talking about SSDs, you will find a lot more, but these are typically some use cases when we come to Raspberry Pi usage. Today we'll see how to boot from SSD, what are the boot options that we can use to boot the Raspberry Pi from an SSD. Is there only one option or two or three? Let's see all of them, and let's also see some secret ingredients to boot from SSD, which are really important, because I've tried days booting my Raspberry from an SSD, which did not work till yesterday, but it did work today. So I'll tell you what all things you have to buy or what all things you need to have in your home to boot a Raspberry from your SSD. Let's get started. To get started, we first need obviously an SSD and Raspberry Pi 5th generation, which is recommendable if you are living in 2024. And then an SD card could be optional, but I recommend you to get an SD card of at least 8 gigs or 16 gigs. 8 gigs is minimum. We just need an SD card to just run a script, so minimum SD card will be also okay. And these two are especially important. Official 27 watt Raspberry Pi power supply, which comes with C-type cable, and compatible SATA to USB cable. I'll give you the product links in the description below, so you can buy it from there. I'm not promoting any product, I'll just give you the links to the website. It will take you to the website, you can buy it from there. Power supply, you can buy it from a website called robo.in. It will give you a 1-day delivery, and it is also a trusted one. SATA to USB cable, you can even buy it on Amazon itself. And cooling system for the Pi, it is recommended for longer stability of the Raspberry Pi. You need to buy it, you have to buy it. Even if you are dealing with experiments with Raspberry Pi, and if you are dealing with GPIOs and all those, you need cooling system to cool the processor, right? These are the typical ones we need to boot the Raspberry, and make sure your internet speed is good. Let's move ahead with the first process of booting your Raspberry Pi from an SSD. The first one is to boot up from the imager. It's the common process that everyone use, but here we'll use somewhat different in here so that you can boot from your SSD. One thing you have to keep in your mind is that you are booting your SSD from a USB. So choose the USB 3.0. The USB 3.0 generally is blue in color, so you can plug your SATA to USB cable in that blue color slot of your Raspberry Pi. And then what you are going to do is, you are telling your Raspberry to boot from an USB, right? So first, without turning on the Raspberry, or without connecting the Raspberry to your desktop, or without even doing SSH into your Raspberry Pi, you should just have to tell the Raspberry, or you should configure the Raspberry setting such that the boot order will go to USB first, and then SD card or NVMe or any other boot options you have, right? What are we going to do is, open the imager, insert your secondary SD card, which I have mentioned before, which has minimum amount of space in it. Go to Raspberry and select Raspberry Pi 5 as your device, because we'll be using 5th one. If you are having an earlier versions like 4 or anything, just select them and then choose the operating system. For the operating system, we don't choose 64-bit or 32-bit. just go down, you will find miscellaneous utility images. Go there and click here. You will find something called NVMe boot. Okay, the second one, click on that. So it will generally try to boot from NVMe before trying USB, and then it will go to SD card. It doesn't mean that it will only boot from NVMe or USB and you get worried that, oh shit, what if it doesn't boot from my SD card again, how to do that. Don't have to worry about that. It will first try to boot from NVMe and then USB and then SD card. It will just change your boot order. Okay, and choose your storage. I'm choosing my secondary SD card, and then click on next. It will write to the SD card. After completion of that, remove our SD card out of your PC and then insert it to your Raspberry Pi without turning it on. Mark this word, don't turn it on before inserting your SD card. After inserting your SD card, just turn the Raspberry Pi on, plug into the power supply, and then your yellow LED on your Raspberry Pi will blink continuously. Let that blink for 10 to 20 seconds at least, so that we can ensure that the script is completely written in the Raspberry Pi and the configuration settings are completely changed, so that we can alter the boot order. And then after that, you can just remove your power supply, remove the SD card out, and then plug in your USB, SATA to USB cable. Just keep that plugged in. We have more process to do. And then when you come back to your imager, just connect your SSD to your PC and then choose Raspberry Pi 5. Remember, this is the second step we are doing now. Now your SSD is connected to your PC. Choose the operating system which you like to operate on your Raspberry Pi. In my case, I am going with 64-bit Raspberry Pi OS. You can choose anything. If you want general purpose, yes, or Raspberry Pi OS other images, yes, you're good with it. I am choosing the first one, and then choose the storage. It's again 8 GB SD card, but you have your SSD inserted here, right? So choose that SSD. Don't choose the SD card again. That's of no use. Choose the SSD. Insert the SSD before operating this imager, so that it will refresh and give you the SSD option there. And close this. And if you want to change some or edit some settings of your Raspberry Pi, or boot settings, if you want to SSH in your Raspberry Pi automatically after booting it up, you can see our first video on how to install Raspberry Pi on your latest new chip, so that you won't have your troubleshooting issues again. The video link will be on the cards or on the end screen, so don't miss that. You can view that video and then come back here, so that you can edit the settings. You can directly SSH into your Raspberry Pi, and then click on next here, so that it will write to your SSD, and then the process is done. Just take your SSD out, put it in the Raspberry Pi, and that's it. You are booting up from your Raspberry Pi. Congrats. But what if I want to get my data, or back up my data from an older SD card which has been running in my Raspberry for just 2 months or 2 weeks, but that data is important to me, right? What if I want to get that data to this SSD and then boot it? You can also do that, right? Raspberry Pi have some built-in applications for that. Let's go and see what are they. The second option in our order is to copy your previous data of your SD card to your new SSD, so that you can just run your SSD as same as your SD card data, but with faster read and write rate and more things and more advantages of SSD. Okay, so what you are going to do is just start your Raspberry with your old SD card first. Okay, boot up your Raspberry, connect it, and then what you have to do is click on this Raspberry symbol and go to accessories. Here you can find SD card copier, right? So before connecting your Raspberry Pi to the power supply, just connect your SSD to the Raspberry Pi through SATA USB cable to the USB 3.0 port. Don't forget that. And also you should have your SD card inserted in it, which could run Raspberry Pi OS on your Raspberry, and then connect it to the power supply. So you have to see an external disk image here, which is your external SSD itself. If you see that, your SSD is successfully connected to your Raspberry and it could boot eventually, right? If you don't see that, then your SATA cable isn't compatible with your Raspberry, so that you have to get a new one. I'll just provide the link in the description. You can go check out there. You can also find some more models, and if you don't find my model compatible with yours, just let me know in the comment section below so that we could discuss about that, and then I'll suggest a new one, right? I did not insert an SSD here so that I don't see an external disk over here. Don't worry about me, just worry about yourself. So here you have to select copy from device they have mentioned, right? So select your SD card over here, okay, your old SD card, and copy to device. I don't have any devices available over here, but you will get your SSD name or your SSD manufacturer name there, and then start the copying process, right? This start will be only enabled if you just click on this copy to device and then double click on that SSD name so that it will be selected there. If you single click it, it won't be selected, okay? Just make sure that you double click it and then start it. The copying process will start and your SD card data will be successfully copied to your SSD, okay? And then close this. Just shut down your Raspberry, and what you do is remove the power supply, remove our old SD card, and one more thing, just go to your go to your terminal. We did not configure the Raspberry to boot from USB first, right? In the previous step we have done it through imager and the secondary SD card, but here we have our Raspberry operating, right? So we can do from inside itself. So what you do is sudo raspi config, this is the command, and I'll just zoom this in. 1 minute. Yeah, here go to advanced options, or in the advanced options go to boot order, okay? Go to boot order and then select USB or NVMe first. SD card will be default. You choose USB or NVMe so that it will first try to boot from NVMe. Ensure that you don't have NVMe on your Raspberry so that the PCI is not connected, and then ensure that your SSD is connected so that it will eventually try to boot from your SSD with no delay. I guess that won't be an issue. Delay won't be an issue. So you can change your boot order from here itself, okay? Don't try to edit config.txt. That's not suggestible as of now, because Raspberry Pi 5 is doing a lot of things and they're doing a lot of changes in this chip, so that you don't have to change config.txt and then going to the config.txt and changing the boot order to if it is 641, you just change it to 41, and then that's not correct actually. You can go to raspi config and change it there. It will change, it will change. After changing this, just reboot your Raspberry and then remove your SD card out, remove the power supply, just plug the SSD in, and then you can boot it from there. You don't have to change your config.txt, right? And of course, Raspberry Pi 5 doesn't allow you to edit your config.txt. In that case, you can just enter this in the middle of your path of your config.txt. What you will do is firmware config.txt. This is the newer thing which you can edit. You can't edit config.txt directly there. They are storing a separate file in separate directory, so that you can go there, you can change it from there. And now your second process is also done. If you have any other process to generally work out, or if you are not being able to boot from these two processes, just let me know in the comment section below. And if you really want to edit your config.txt and do it from there, you're good with it, you can go, but it is not advisable if you do it, right? These are the two options I could find to boot your Raspberry via USB SATA cable. That's it for this video. I've done this video for the future video, which is going to be mind-blowing, because you need your SSD on your Pi so that we could do some amazing projects which are coming ahead. I'll give you a surprise at the end. Don't miss it. Just watch more 10 seconds ahead. Don't miss it. Thanks for hanging there for just 5 to 10 seconds. So this is the surprise I was talking about. So don't stress your eyes much. It is visible, I know that. The coming project is my most anticipated project that I wanted to do on this YouTube channel. The main purpose of buying my Raspberry is because of this one itself. So the coming video is so special for me, and it will be special for you too if you watch it completely from the first to the end, so that we'll be building more and more projects on this starting building blocks of AI. That's correct. Helicon Explanations alias Helix is entering into the world of AI with Halo AI module in the beginning, and then we'll run some amazing LLMs on this Raspberry Pi, this mini computer which can fit in your pocket itself. So imagine the power of that and the power of your own custom SSD. Get ready. The video will be releasing soon. Until then, signing off.